This is Dr. Vaishali and I'm reading from the book Substance of Homeopathy, book written by Dr. Rajan Sankaran, chapter number 6, Understanding Miasm. I have dealt extensively with the concept disease is a delusion, awareness is a cure. In my Spirit of Homeopathy, in my book Spirit of Homeopathy, relating this idea to theory of miasm, it becomes clear that classification of disease must be a classification of the delusion. As drugs are nothing but artificial disease, the classification is both a disease state and a drug state classification. We know that disease is a false perception of reality, means a delusion. This false perceptions of the reality has its root in an actual situation which existed either in a patient's own life earlier or as a state in the parent. However, the impact of that situation is such that when we face with another situation, the patient reaction is still as though he is in the previous situation. For example, a man suddenly come to face a lion. He is a panic stricken and flees from the spot. Later, when he suddenly see a cat, there is a terror on his face. In other words, he react as though he had seen a lion, means of a previous situation. This is his delusion. Thus, we see that the disease expression are the response. Delusion is all cases where there is no exciting maintaining cause to account for the response. And in nearly all cases, the response is not due to the exciting maintaining cause, which if present must be removed. And I shall deal with the disease entirely as a delusion, qualifying this very necessary. And it is this response that we perceive as a symptom. In order to find out if there was a particular theme to each miasm or not, I study some drug generally accepted to belong to that miasm, attempting to find the common theme in them if there was one. I use Hahnemann classification of disease and drugs. In acute, there are medicine aconite, belladonna and stramonium. In chronic, you can say in sora, it is sulfur sorinum. In psychosis, thuja medorum, syphilis, mercurius syphilinum. I shall now give a brief analysis of these groups and the conclusion that that would be drawn from the same. I have tried to restrict myself entirely to rubrics that can be found in the text. The conclusions that follow are therefore not based on my personal experience alone, and it can be reached by anyone who make a similar study. The fact remains, however, that I was greatly aided in arriving at this conclusion from my understanding, means from the clinical experience of the drug and the patient. Thus, I recognize Madaram as a person who is very anxious that his weakness should not be exposed and use egotism to cover up his weakness. As this is an abstraction derived from the personal experience, I have not included it in the analysis. Now you can see the analysis. In aconite, there is a fear of walking across a busy street, fear of accident, of suffocation, death, presentiment of, delusion about to die, and in this a feeling that something sudden will happen resulting in sudden death. And exactly second example is belladonna, where the symptoms are or delusion pursued by the police and soldier, vision of a gallows with a fear alternating with a rage, and in this belladonna state, feeling he will be pursued, killed, and therefore runs and escape and rage. Third one is stramonium, delusion lost in the wilderness, delusion dogs attacks him, desire light and company, child wake up screaming, recognize no one and cling to those nearby, danger impression of. In this, the impression of danger and seek a safe spot. A similar study could be made for the hyoscyamus, veratrum and lysinum, etc. Now conclusion is what? We find that all these drugs, there is feeling or the delusion that there is a strong threat from the outside world. and the person react in an instinctive reflexive manner. It will be noticed that aconite, belladonna, which are the best example of the acute miasm, are given in the sympathetic repertory under the sudden manifestation. Now, under soric miasm, sulfur. The sulfur has a fear of poverty, delusion he is getting thin, talks of business, delusion disgraced, imagine himself a great man, and though ignorant, despite literally man and education. Now, we can understand, we find that there is a struggle with ego and money. The feeling is that he is losing something and must struggle to get it back. A second example is sorinum, where the despair of recovery during convalescence, the fear of poverty, feeling that business will fail, though it is a prosperous, delusion going to lose his fortune, ailment from the anticipation, and feel good and bad in turns. And in this, he feel like that there is a feeling that things may go wrong at any time, though they are fine at the moment. Therefore, to keep things as they are, he must struggle. And conclusion is what? In delusion here has two components: stress from outside and anxiety from doubt about his ability, means capacity to deal with this stress. Will be able to do it or not. However, failure here does not mean the end of the world. Now in psychotic miasm, example of thuja, where the delusion is thin, delusion is made of glass, as if body is fragile, fixed ideas, religious fantasism, insanity, will not be touched or approached, and secretiveness. Here the feeling of fixed weakness in himself is very evident, and the patient covers his up by not allowing anyone to come near him, both physically and mentally and psychologically. Second example is madorinum, where the sensitivity to slight critics, sensitivity to reprimand, fear of misfortune, anticipatory anxiety, anxiety when a time is set, aversion to responsibility, washing hand, and egotism. Here the feeling that there are faults in him that may be noticed and evoke criticism and cover up with egotism. The conclusion of psychotic miasm is what? The feeling is, I am incapable of handling this situation. Something is wrong with me. With the admission of weakness in self is an attempt to cope with it and cover it up. The patient keeps trying to make up for this specific weakness in him even when the situation does not demand it, though the environment is normal. This feeling probably arises after struggling without success for some time. Now in a syphilic miasm, example is mercurius, where the delusion surrounded by enemy, suspicious, considers everyone his enemy, impulse to kill the person who contradict, impulse to kill his beloved one, and suicidal. In this feeling is what? He feels viciously attacked from all sides. A desperate situation which require him to do desperate things to come out of it. And second example is syphilinum. Delusion are antisocial, hopeless despair of recovery, indifference, horrid depression and desire and despair, liar, want to moral feeling, kill, desire to, and washing hand. And this syphilinum, the feeling that there is absolutely no hope. The reaction is violent, antisocial, and kills and homicide, etc. Conclusion in syphilitic miasm is what? The feeling is, I cannot manage, I can't cope with the problem, both inside and outside. I cannot adapt to this unfavorable situation, nor can I control or cover up my weakness. The response to this feeling is drastic, do or die attempt to change either himself or environment. A violent process, a last-ditch attempt, while the person tries to regain control. There is an internal feeling of despair and futility. The situation appears hopeless. These conclusions are corroborated by the central features of the infection itself. Like in acute miasm, there is a sudden onset, rapid progress, and swift determinations, either death or a recovery. In SORA, It is a scabies, means itching, a constant struggle with extreme discomfort but not life-threatening, not a hopeless. And in psychosis, that is a gonorrhea. Means GLEAT is the most characteristic manifestations. A chronic, steady, fixed defense with no likelihood or complete recovery, but not a desperate situation at all. In syphilis, a chronic desperate struggle where the body destroys itself in attempt to survive. Ulcerations, caries, etc. A violent effort in hopeless situation. The body responds to particular infection in a specific manner. The nature of infection determines the response. Thus, infection with T. pallidum call for a specific type of response, the syphilitic response. When a person reacts to any situation in the inappropriate manner, for example, in a syphilitic manner, where all that was required was a struggle, then the underlying miasm is syphilis. Consider a student who has failed in exam. All he needs to do study hard, means struggle to pass the next exam. However, if he commits suicide, example, identically felt it was a hopeless situation, required a drastic solution. This is a syphilitic response, and the underlying miasm is syphilis. Now, perception of reality differs according to the miasm of the individual. Therefore, to recognize the miasm, determine how reality is perceived by the patient. Let me illustrate that concept of miasm with an example. Imagine that you are driving a car on a lonely mountain road and suddenly there is a loud noise and the car starts wobbling. You instinctively stop the car and get out of fast as you can, and you get palpitation, start sweating and are in a state of great panic and excitement. Once out of your car, you find that it was only a burst tire. Your panic recedes on realizing that the situation is not so threatening. You realize that you have to change the tire and start struggling with it, wondering if you can do it. After some time, you realize that you are incapable of doing it and light a cigarette, and while waiting for someone to help you out, finally you lose all hope and you know that no one is going to help you out and you cannot do it yourself. So you kick the car angrily and lie down. Indifferent to what happens, the four phases of the incident represent the four miasm. Panic means acute miasm. Struggle means sura miasm. Feeling of incapacity and cover up is psychotic miasm. And despair and destructive is syphilitic miasm. We can see here how the first stage could possibly require the aconite, the second required lycopodium, third required argentinum nitricum, and the fourth required syphilinum, respectively. What is the interesting is that the external situation is the same, namely burst tire. The various miasm represent a progressive failure to cope with the situation. As the person failed in his struggle, he is a sora and he start developing bad feeling about himself. He become having a fixed idea, so he become a psychotic. He had a psychotic miasm trait, and when he this reach a certain level, he become a filled with despair, and then it suggests syphilis. Thus, I would like to stress again that the same external situation or the reality is present is perceived differently depending on the miasm of the person.